Hello everyone, welcome back to HS English. Today we'll be looking at the character of Curly from Of Mice and Men, and I prepared an essay plan here at IGCSE Standards. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So the first thing about Curly is his stature on the farm. He's the boss's son, and he aims to emphasize this. This can be seen by how he wears high-heeled boots to mark his status, but he also aims to reduce the deficit for his lack of stature because he's quite short, and therefore he suffers short man syndrome unlike other ranch workers. Therefore, this quote of Curly here is that he likes like a lot of little guys, he hates big guys, and therefore he's described as having a head also of tightly curled hair. That is almost like a metaphor for how he's aiming to like have this grip, being like really tightly control the ranch workers, especially as he's described as being cockier than ever since getting married, and he's always looking for a fight really to portray his masculinity, as seen by his described being handy with his fists. And as the heir to the ranch, this is where you can add the historical context, is his position on the ranch is secure because he doesn't suffer in the way that itinerant farm workers do. He's shielded from the unsettled life of ranch workers, who often these are migrant workers traveling from farm to farm, a fear of being canned, a fear of losing their jobs due to the impact of the Great Depression. But Curry doesn't have to suffer from this, and therefore he really emphasised on this ranch. He is the man with authority, but still many ranch workers backbite about him, whether it's making jokes about how he wears a glove full of Vaseline. So it really shows that despite the authority Curly aims to achieve, he doesn't really actually achieve it in a real sense. The second paragraph talks about Curly's relationship with George and Lenny. As can be seen by on their first meeting, George glances coldly when first seeing them, almost with like a boxer stance, goes to a slight crouch, especially when it comes to dealing with Lenny, because Lenny's much bigger than Curly, and of course having short man syndrome, this is where Curly gets most offended from, and therefore eventually they actually get into a fight, but Curly comfortably loses, and Slim actually convinces Curly to say that his hand got caught in a machine. And this almost is a great challenge actually to Curly's authority, because at the end of the day, Slim's words were law. That's actually a quote from the book, and it shows that despite the fact that he's an heir to the kind of the boss, heir to the ranch, he doesn't portray the sense of authority that one would assume with such an heir. Many farm workers actually are able to manipulate him because Curly is, despite him being handy with his fist, as seen here, is comfortably beaten up by Lenny. But crucially, this kind of rivalry between Curly and Lenny continues, and it's seen by how at the end of the book, when George has to shoot Lenny, Curly shows no remorse. In fact, Curly's wanting Lenny to be lynched actually, because Lenny killed Curly's wife. And this kind of lack of empathy, the lack of understanding, this cold nature of Curly is something that you can look at in this paragraph. He doesn't have this emotion, because he's confused actually by George and Lenny's sadness, George and Slim's sadness, upon Lenny's death, and it shows that even though he's not a migrant ranch worker, the conditions almost of the Great Depression means that he also doesn't have a sense of emotion that actually is lacking in other farm workers. George and Lenny's relationship is a big anomaly, and eventually it fails. And this kind of sense of coldness and isolation is a great theme of the Great Depression, because even though Curly's not fearing being canned, he still portrays the isolationist fear that is almost present in all workers and migrant workers. And this can show that the Great Depression has an impact on all forms of society. And another thing, though, with Curly, that yes, he's cold, but he also aims to intimidate ranch workers, because ranch workers, this is where you can add the historical context, is they fear about losing their job, but worried about unemployment, because 71% of the USA was actually living below $2,500 a year during the Great Depression, and Curly aims to revel in that almost. He wants to show that I have authority, that I can eventually can you. But again, the juxtaposition, the counter of this would be Curly being forced to say that his hand got caught in a machine. He lacks the kind of authority when it comes to a real sense. After he lost the fight, he's unable to beat Slim almost on the authority when it comes to the ranch. And continuing on with Curly, he also even shows no care or affection towards his own wife. He basically objectifies her, a possession. Therefore, Curly's wife can be seen to have no name. And this can be seen how Curly visits the brothel merely 2 weeks into the marriage, shows he's very inconsiderate. And even Curly's wife tells Lenny how Curly ain't a nice fella. And even Curly's wife, the marriage to Curly was merely in haste because Curly's wife, her own American dream was to get into the movies, but that failed. Eventually, Curly's wife blames the mother for stealing the letters that would have got her into the kind of film industry. But and this just shows that marriage can be seen to have been desperate, and or for Curly's wife at least, because she's always flirting and socializing with other ranch workers instead of being with Curly. And furthermore, Curly's wife isn't actually upset on his wife's death. The lack of affection, again, that whole possession thing. He's actually more obsessed with lynching Lenny and getting kind of an upper hand because Lenny had already beat him in a fight, rather than showing any remorse for his wife. And this, the kind of historic context you can add for this is that women were often objectified and treated as possessions and had clear roles in society. Um, sorry, without clear roles in society that there should have been. Um, it was even seen and normal actually for men to go out to brothels, like for example Susie's place, and even for newlyweds like Curly. And many women were actually forced, just to sell their own sexuality, actually just to earn money during the Great Depression. And it shows that it reaches all forms, or everyone. It's not just ranch workers, men, women, rich and poor alike. Everyone suffered due to the result of the Great Depression. But yeah, I'm just gonna definitely that is women clearly do not have a role in society. They're completely at the bottom of the kind of ranch. It's a very patriarchal society, if you had to put it that way. So yeah, thank you. That was the paragraph, or essay plan, sorry, on Curly. Thank you for listening. That comes to the end now. When it comes to our characters for Mice and Men, feel free to look at the other playlist. We have a lot more videos there, and I'll be looking at themes from now on. So hopefully it all goes well. Feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you.